Hey, howdy y'all, it's Frightman. I visited the National Museum of Funeral History in Houston, Texas. This place is beautiful, it is amazing, and the history of funerals is just fascinating. And I'd like to show you some of the favorite exhibits that I saw.
Let's go.
This 1921 Rock Falls hearse is just a beauty. It's made out of 6 different types of wood, and as you can see, the wood is carved to look like curtains. I mean, this thing is beautiful. This late 1800s horse-drawn hearse was designed to be pulled over ice and snow. This 1929 Studebaker hearse was used as recently as the 1950s. This vehicle could be converted into an ambulance or into a hearse, as it was common for funeral directors to own both services. You're looking at an 1860s horse-drawn hearse, which was found in Germany in 1989, where it was still being used. It was purchased and brought to Houston for the museum. This 1939 Superior LaSalle was purchased by a furniture company which had a funeral home in their basement and was still in service until 1962. Look at the shiny grille on this 1951 Cadillac hearse. It's 40 inches wide and was capable of carrying the largest of caskets made. This 1900s hearse was specially designed for children, and it was pulled by 2 men who wore black suits and gloves, and this was constructed in Saint Remy, Quebec. This 1938 Henny Packard flower car is certainly one of my favorites. Brand new, this car cost $2,036 and was one of the most popular flower cars in America. Why is it called a flower car? Well, it carried the coffin and it also carried all the flowers. You're looking at a 1926 Sayers and Scoville hearse. This is the deluxe Washington model, and this car was restored to the exact specifications of the manufacturer and is outfitted with gold exterior mounting and rosewood interior trim. What a beautiful color on it. This 1916 Buick Savers and Scoville features blackwood carved curtains to resemble draperies and has a double-decker in the exterior for the casket below and the flowers above. This 1916 Packard funeral bus is the only surviving one of its kind. It was originally owned by a funeral home in San Francisco, and when it was being used, it was climbing up a hill, and the weight in the back section caused the vehicle to tip back. The pallbearers fell over the mourners, and the casket overturned. The embarrassed funeral director removed the bus from service, and it sat on a ranch for 40 years before being discovered. This 2003 Cadillac hearse was used both for the funeral of Ronald Reagan in 2004 and Gerald Ford in 2006. This recreation of the Abraham Lincoln 1865 burial scene features an exact replica of his coffin. This coffin originally cost $1,500 when purchased new. It also features a scene showing the train. The Lincoln train is coming. This was a phrase that was repeated in 1865 all along the 1,666-mile-long journey from Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois. This 1972 Japanese ceremonial hearse was typically used throughout Japan to transport the casket and the deceased from the home to the temple and finally to the crematorium. This hearse is equipped with a speaker system to play music during the funeral procession. This section features fantasy coffins, which became popular in Ghana. This fantasy coffin tradition plays homage to the dead in a new and powerful way. Let's say you were a pilot. Maybe you'd be buried in a plane. Maybe a fisherman would be in a fish or in a boat. Every time I see this exhibit, I wonder, what would I want to be buried in? Let me know in the comments what would be your fantasy coffin. The museum also features a section called Making of a Saint, which takes you through the end of life of several different popes. It's quite beautiful to see. It reminds me of being in a church. This recreation of an embalming house in Egypt is just beautiful. The embalming process took up to 70 days and was conducted on embalming tables. The standing lion was a symbol of protection, so embalming tables were carved in this manner. The practice of embalming in America began in the Civil War and was introduced by Dr. Thomas Holmes, the father of American embalming. He experimented with different drugs and compounds which he would sell to surgeons, and of course later the embalming fluid to undertakers. In this display case, you can see many of the early tools and equipment used for embalming. This was called an ice box casket, and this was used prior to embalming. The body was surrounded with ice. Having the body surrounded in ice had a lot of drawbacks. This version was an upgraded model which featured a board at the bottom so that the body could be elevated above the ice. This display recreates a typical funeral home embalming room in the late 1920s. I find it very interesting that the table is made out of glass. It's able to tilt, and you'll see that there is a drain plug with a bucket to catch the fluids out of the body. In the 1920s, encasing coffins in glass became a thing to keep moisture away from the body, but the practice ended as often the glass would get cracked when lowering the casket into the gravesite. Until it's my time, this is the closest I'll probably ever get to a cremation burner. I couldn't resist pushing the buttons up and down and imagining what it must be like to actually be an operator for a machine like this. The museum features a very large display of cremation urns. going back to early times and to modern times. Some of them they were actually quite beautiful. I don't really have experience with a cremation urn, and I was impressed at all the variety that is available. This is part of a 1999 fire truck destroyed in 9/11. And of course, we have to have memories of some of our favorite horror icons like Herman Munster and Bela Lugosi. Believe it or not, that's just a small portion of what the museum has. This place is amazing. If you're ever in the Houston area, you have to stop in and check this place out in person. But here's the cool thing. If you're not in the Houston area, you can still go to the website and take a virtual tour. And I did both, and both are just amazing. I'll put a link in the description so that you can take a virtual tour if that's something that you'd like to do. Let me know in the comments what was your favorite thing that you saw in this video. And if you take the virtual tour, come back and let me know how you liked it. I'm positive that you're going to enjoy what you see. If you'd like to see more from Frightman Frights, you can see that around here somewhere. And until next time, stay spooky, my friends.